Components are important, right? That is why we start with one, with the app component. It, on the one hand, is a normal Angular component, but on the other hand, it's also kind of special because it serves as our root component. It's in the end listed here in the app module in this bootstrap array, which tells Angular, hey, this is a special component. You should bootstrap the whole application with that component being the root component. So all other components we create will not be added to the index.html file. Their selectors will not be added here. Their selectors will be added to the app component HTML file because this is now the, root component of our app where we add the other parts. Enough talking about adding components. Let's add one. Let's say we want to output some information about a server. We're building a backend for our server management application and we want to output some server information. So I will store this in a new folder, which is a subfolder of the app folder, because generally in an Angular CLI project, all your app-related content will go into this app folder. I will name it server because it will hold my server component. And this is a good practice, having the folder name equal your component name. And each component typically should have its own folder, though it's not a hard rule, but generally it makes sense. So here in the server folder, I will add my server component. Now, a good naming convention is to have server, so the name of your component first, then a dot, and then component. We will later learn that there are other building blocks in an Angular application too, so by using file names like this, it's very easy to see what's inside the file. And very important, don't forget to add .ts, so for TypeScript, because this is what we will write this component in. So now we got an empty file for our new component. How do we create a component now? First of all, a component simply is just a class, a TypeScript class, so that Angular is able to instantiate it to create objects based on the blueprint we set up here, you could say. So let's export this class so that we can use it outside of this file too, because as I mentioned before, we're going to use our component in the app component, for example, to add it there. So we will add a class here, and this class should now be named server component. Again, the naming convention here, have the name of the component first, server, and then also the description, component, because later we will also learn about other parts which might then be named differently in the Angular app. This is our class, and right now it's a normal TypeScript class, nothing special about it. We can't use it like this. Angular doesn't have all the information it requires. So we should add something to it which tells Angular that this is not only a normal TypeScript class, but instead something special, a component. We do this by adding a special decorator. Decorators are a TypeScript feature which allow you to enhance your classes, for example, enhance elements you use in your code. It's not restricted to classes, but here we will use a class decorator. It's the component decorator, and decorators are always attached by adding an @ sign in front of them. Now, this component decorator is not something TypeScript knows from the start, so we have to import it. We have to add an import, and this import now needs to give us access to components. So we need to import component between curly braces, because from the file where we're going to import this, we could import other parts too. So we have to specifically pick the component by using this syntax. And then it's from, and now the package where we import component from is @Angular core. Now Angular ships with a couple of packages where it basically groups its functionalities. And the core package, as the name implies, gives us access to some of the core functionalities of Angular. So with that, we import that component. Now this add component decorator is known to TypeScript, so when it parses this file and compiles it to JavaScript, it is able to understand it. Now we need to pass a JavaScript object to this component decorator to configure it, because without any configuration, it's still not that valuable to Angular. But here we can set up some important information which will be stored as metadata for this class in the background then, which will tell Angular what to do with this class. And one important information piece is the selector. So basically the HTML tag by which you're able to use this component later in your other components templates. We will see this in action soon. The selector should be a string, and here you may set up any name you want, but you should make sure that it is a unique selector, that you don't accidentally override a default HTML element or something like this. So typically you prefix it with app dash and then a fitting name, like server, because it's a server component. This is my own selector by which I can now later use this component in my other components HTML files. So with that set up, the other important piece we need to have is the template. And here, let's reference another external file. I'll come back to another alternative to this soon. And this external file, of course, needs to be created. So in the same folder, I will create a server.component and now .html file. This will hold the template, the HTML code of my component here. So here, I can now basically add any content I want, like for example, the server component to start simple. And back to the TypeScript file, I can now point to this HTML file. We need a relative path for this. In the end, this will all get bundled by Webpack, so we need to tell it where to find the HTML file. Well, and relative to the TypeScript file, the path simply is /server.component.html, like this. This is pointing to this file. With this, we created our first component. Now to use it, we need to dive into app module and understand what this does, because we need to change something here to use our own component. Let's do this in the next lecture.